lots of gratitude to the FedEx Institute of Technology and Christine and Blockchain901 for having me here today. So I'm really looking forward to diving into the world of decentralized finance, and the goal of the presentation is to kind of give everyone a soft landing into the space and arm you with enough knowledge so that you can kind of go down the DeFi rabbit hole and explore different interest areas that you find throughout the presentation. So with that said, I will share my screen and kick it off. Can everyone see my screen? All right. Rami or Christine, can you?
Yeah.
Okay,
okay.
perfect.
I can see everything too.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll get right into it. And before I jump into the world of DeFi or decentralized finance, I think it's important to kind of give everyone a little bit of a primer on Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is fundamental to everything that's going on right now in the blockchain world. And it is going to be the foundational new kind of infrastructure layer for the new internet that is currently in the works. So if we look at today's internet, Web 2.0, it's a highly centralized and monopolized web. It's highly centralized and monopolized by large internet companies. I don't have to name them, large social media companies, the Googles, the Apples, and decades into the mass adoption of the internet, the data architectures are still based on the client server model, where data is centrally stored and managed. And this architecture has resulted in, again, a highly centralized web. So the web's centralized nature makes it vulnerable to security threats, malicious data gathering by intermediaries, privacy intrusion, and it also adds cost for end users. So Web 2.0, the web that we have today, has really enabled a rich and seamless ability to have interactions on a global scale, but always with the middleman. So in this case, the middleman is, again, as I mentioned, those platforms that are acting as trusted intermediaries that dictate the rules of these interactions and transactions while controlling all of the user data. With Web 2.0, it kind of further democratized participation in the web, created new opportunities that arose from kind of the ubiquity of mobile connectivity. But again, the economic engine is very much largely privatized and monopolized. And what I mean by that is, Web 2.0 companies today largely use an ad-based business model to generate revenue. And so effectively, the end user becomes the product, and they're mining and using and monetizing your data to be able to generate revenue. So the end user has really no control over their data, their identity, and how they interact, in kind of who's surveilling, I guess, on the web. I guess globally, data privacy concerns are also intensifying, and we've seen this with the introduction of laws like GDPR. This is really kind of clearing a path for a more decentralized web, one that's more secure, transparent, and kind of allows end users to regain control of their data. So assuming that Web kind of 1.0 revolutionized information, Web 2.0 did the same thing for interactions, Web 3.0 is really about revolutionizing, data privacy, security, and value exchange on the internet. So to kind of put this into kind of a greater context, the inventor of the web is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and this is a quote that that I found where he said, "For all the good that we've achieved, the web has evolved into an engine of inequity and division, swayed by powerful forces who use it for their own agendas. Obviously, it's not all bad, but the fact that end users don't have a lot of control is something we're looking to change with Web 3.0. So if we look at the evolution of the web from 2.0 to Web 3.0, we're largely interacting with now, instead of just regular apps, we're starting to interact with decentralized applications. And these decentralized applications are built on top of blockchain platforms and ultimately will allow users to control, again, their data and who has access to their data, and much, much more than that. So with Web 3.0, again, users control their own data, not corporations. Global digital transactions are secure. Online exchange of information and value is completely decentralized because it's all based on blockchain infrastructure. So again, kind of reiterating, Web 3.0 is kind of revolutionizing all of the items I talked about, and blockchain layers are kind of forming that foundational layer. With that, I wanted to also talk about, as some background to the talk on DeFi, talk about the economic model evolution that we've seen as we've gotten further into a digital economy. So when we look back at industrialization and we look at this centralized economy of the past, during the 1850s up until maybe the 1990s, it was very much corporate model. Employees within companies worked for these companies provided goods and services. Everything was focused on expanding shareholder value, very little data sophistication. As we get into the economy of today, right, this is focused on the platform economy. We're seeing many, many platforms out there, whether it's Amazon or Uber or Airbnb and e-commerce platforms and what have you. It's very much a marketplace model that we've kind of evolved into, right? And in this model, employees and outside contributors are generating value for these firms. So shareholder value is really attributed to both these outside contributors and consumers, as well as folks inside the company. We're starting to increase the level of data usage and sophistication and introduce important innovations like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on and so forth as well. So we're getting a little bit more complex, but the platform economy is still very much centralized, right? We have a central intermediary that governs and runs that platform and makes decisions and dictates how we use it. Now, as we look to the future, and I would argue the future is now because the protocol economy is already well underway. This is an economy that, again, is built on blockchain infrastructure. It's permissionless. Any and all participants are incentivized to contribute and use the new protocols or new applications built within this economy. It's focused on community value versus shareholder value, right? So all contributors, all users are effectively stakeholders who benefit from the increase in value of the protocol itself. And when we talk about Web 3 or Web 3.0, data sovereignty is really, really key. So data is key to this economy and hence prioritized and protected and controlled by the end users, not by organizations that are intermediating access and interactions on the web. So before I continue further, I want to do a quick poll. The question here is, of all of you in attendance, how many crypto Web3 users do you believe there will be by 2024? So if you could just, if Rami, if you're able to set up the poll, I'm not sure if you want to share screen, but
no, we've already launched it. So yeah, there's about
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to respond, and
sure.
And Rami, if you don't mind, if you could just read out the results, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a few people who haven't responded yet. About 2/3 of everyone has done so. So we'll give everyone about another, say, 30 seconds or so to answer.
That's good.
All right, we'll give everyone a few more, about another 10 seconds or so to answer. If you've not seen the poll, I'm gonna go ahead and submit an answer. About everyone participated except for a few people, which is fine. All right. So out of the question was, how many crypto/Web3 users do you believe there will be by 2024? Over 46% of people said 100 million. 31% of the attendees said 1 billion. 15% said 50 million and 8% said 2 billion.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Rami. And I think most folks kind of hit the nail on the head there. Somewhere between 100 and a billion users. And the way that we have been able to kind of make that estimate is I'm gonna kind of go through this graph. There's a lot going on here, but basically anything in orange is related to crypto. Anything in white is related to the internet adoption. And what I want to highlight here is where we are today in terms of crypto adoption. So we are already well past 100 million users worldwide. And if we overlay this on the internet, so the white line, which is showing the internet adoption, you can see at the top here where it says 1997, we're effectively, in the year 1997 in terms of internet adoption. So it just goes to show you how early we still are in the crypto and largely the Web3 space. But if we fast forward to 2024, where the dotted line is here, we can see that we're on track to hit 1 billion users, and I would argue that we'll probably surpass that. So this is all kind of background to set the stage for DeFi. I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into the world of Web3 and how the web is currently being rewired and transformed. Decentralized finance is very much part of this transformation that's happening in the blockchain-based web of Web3. And as we have more users, I think, and as more users join this revolution, we're going to start to see a lot more activity across not just decentralized finance, but many other application areas of Web3. So with that said, let's jump right into it. What is DeFi? So if we look at the genesis of DeFi and we go back to the industrial era finance, largely the structure of the financial system hasn't really changed very much. We've had these highly capitalized financial institutions, law firms, regulatory bodies that have effectively formed this trust layer for the existing banking and financial system. And then we also have, what I call rent-seeking intermediaries, or intermediaries that are basically brokering transactions and data within the banking system and more broadly the financial system. So we have payment service providers, we have third-party administrators, brokers, clearinghouses and capital markets, adjusters and insurance. So we have a lot of kind of intermediation that's happening. And with that, the existing financial system today I would argue, is quite inefficient. And transactions and participating in the financial services sector and capital markets in general, requires a lot of this intermediation. There's a lot of fees that are extracted along the way, hence the rent-seeking intermediaries, and the time to do it as well, because we're dealing with very old legacy infrastructure for the most part. So if we fast forward to what the financial system is going to look like, and in my opinion, I think we're moving there very quickly. What is decentralized finance about, and how is it going to take us from that industrial era financial infrastructure to this new era of infrastructure? So DeFi is a financial system without a central governing authority. It's fully open to anyone around the world. There are no barriers to participate. You simply just need an internet connection. So it sits at the intersection of financial products and services with decentralized networks and protocols. And of course, when we talk about decentralized networks, we're talking about blockchains. So DeFi startups are working hard to strip away, again, these centralized parties or the if you recall, the rent-seeking intermediaries in financial services using these decentralized blockchain protocols. And DeFi is, radically changing the way that we interact with our global financial system, from, Western and kind of developed nations all the way through to developing nations as well. So when we compare traditional finance to DeFi, I've pulled a few items from a report that was released by the Wharton Blockchain Digital Asset Project in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. The report was called "The Emerging World of Decentralized Finance: DeFi Beyond the Hype." And there's some really good information in there. So I wanted to kind of contrast the two here between TradFi, traditional finance, and DeFi. So how are assets custodied today in the existing financial system? Well, they are held by service providers, custodians. Effectively, think about your bank account. If you have money in your bank account today, you might own that money, but you don't necessarily control it, right? The bank issues you an IOU, and it's within the bank's control. So if they want to freeze your accounts, or if they decide that you no longer can have access, that's within their control. On the contrary, with DeFi, assets, your crypto assets, are held in non-custodial wallets, right? You're interacting with smart contracts, and smart contracts based escrow as well. So everything is held within these smart contracts. No other centralized party or institution has access to it. Only you do, and only you hold the keys to be able to access that wallet. So it's custodial versus non-custodial. When we think about execution, there's a lot of intermediaries processing transactions between third parties. And again, this requires intermediation cost and time. In DeFi, it's all happening within via smart contracts operating on the user's assets. So things are a little bit, actually, I would say they're a lot faster. And I would say things are again, within the user's control in terms of when and how they want to execute. Clearing and settlement within TradFi is processed, largely by clearinghouses, and happens after a period of time. So if you think about when you trade a stock today, for example, with existing capital markets infrastructure, it's T+2. It's the settlement happens 2 days after the execution of the trade. And that's, again, because of the legacy infrastructure that we have in TradFi. With DeFi, writing transactions, to the underlying blockchain actually completes settlement, and that can happen very, very quickly, from seconds to minutes. Governance is one of the most important things when we compare traditional finance to DeFi. With traditional finance, the rules are specified by the provider, marketplace, regulator, and/or self-regulatory organization. But in decentralized finance, it's very much community-based, and this is really important. DeFi protocols are very much like co-ops, where the community owns it, and the protocol developers or the end users, effectively, that have tokens, are able to vote on things like treasury management for that protocol, system upgrades or protocol upgrades, grants issuance. All of these things and more can be voted on in very much a community-based governance model. One area where traditional finance is still, I would say, kind of, I guess they're kind of winning this category, is collateralization requirements. So in traditional finance, we have credit scores. You can get credit with very little or no collateral required. Whereas in decentralized finance, because there is no centralized institution that adjudicates or manages disputes, everything is within smart contracts that are automated. You need to over collateralize. So for example, if I wanted to borrow money on a DeFi protocol, I wanted to borrow the equivalent of $100 in Ethereum or ETH, I would need to over collateralize by 150%. So we need to have $150 of other crypto assets locked within a smart contract for the term of that loan, just to give you an idea of how that would work. Okay, so what is the core innovation in DeFi? Well, again, summarizing, the trust layer is now abstracted away from intermediaries and kind of other institutions, and it's now just in the software and the code sitting on top of blockchain infrastructure. We eliminate the time and cost of intermediation. We're dealing with programmable money, right? Cryptocurrencies, tokens, we're talking about programmable money, real-time risk transfer, auditability of financial contracts, which is inherent to blockchains because of the fact that they're transparent and the ledger is auditable and available to anyone that wants to see it. And the last one, which is a really interesting one, is the composability of various DeFi protocols. We can actually stack them together. Think about all these smart contracts being stacked together and put together to create entirely new financial services and products that would not even be possible in traditional finance because of things like tokens and interesting governance models, and because of composability between all of these DeFi protocols. So when we think about the implications of DeFi for developed markets, it's going to provide greater choice to consumers. It's going to strip out costs from legacy financial systems, and it's going to bring about greater liquidity and product innovation to capital markets. On the flip side, when we look at emerging markets, DeFi is really providing a more secure store of value and bringing banking style services to the nearly 1.7 billion adults who today lack access to any formal financial system. So if you think about emerging markets in Africa and South Asia, in Africa in particular, we've seen rural communities. Everyone has access to a cell phone. Rural communities are actually using airtime credits as currency, right? Because they don't have access, they don't have a credit score, these individuals, or maybe they don't even have access to financial services. There are no bank branches or any institutions in those areas that they can walk into and get some credit or get a bank account. So they're paying for groceries and other communities within these villages and communities via airtime credits. Now, anyone with access to a phone or access to a computer and the internet can participate in decentralized finance. So now we're not only unlocking the ability for transactions via tokens and cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange, but we are now also introducing all sorts of financial services and new products that those individuals would have never had access to before. But they can, because again, DeFi is completely borderless, no barriers, anyone can participate. So quickly before I move on, I'd like to summarize, again, the advantages over traditional finance. So we're enabling global access to financial services for anyone with an internet connection. DeFi reduces the costs for end users by eliminating profit-seeking financial institutions. It optimizes yield for depositors by sharing interest on liquidity proportionally. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more depth in the slides to come. It automates transactions with self-executing contracts for optimal efficiency. So smart contracts can execute based on preset conditions that users set. So all of this can happen way more efficiently than having someone manually intermediate transactions and process transactions. And ultimately, we're catalyzing open innovation with open source code for decentralized development. So any developers can participate and build on top of decentralized infrastructure and build new protocols, enhance existing protocols. And lastly, we're empowering users to participate in the governance of their own monetary policy. So when we think about monetary policy today, the Fed, central banks around the world really control that. With decentralized finance, it's community controlled. It's really voted on by users of a DeFi protocol. So how big is DeFi? What is the potential in terms of the total addressable market? So if we kind of focus on the right-hand side of the screen, we can see that where DeFi has potential to disrupt an $800 trillion addressable market comprised of bonds and equities, derivatives, mortgages, and even the current M1 money supply. So it's a really, really massive market, and we'll get into it. What the size of DeFi today is just over 80 billion, and the metric we actually use is something called total value locked, which I will get into a little bit later. But I just wanted to help you understand that we're still very, very, very early. I mean, if you look at the number just here on the bottom, it says DeFi has only eaten 0.01% of traditional finance's TAM. So far. So we have a long way to go before DeFi really hits mainstream and reaches a level of maturity that will, compete and maybe even pose a threat to the existing financial system. Okay, let's look at DeFi categories and examples. So let's get into actual DeFi protocols. So if we think about Bitcoin, Bitcoin was actually the first DeFi use case. It's programmable money. It's a cryptocurrency that is, can be sent instantly across the globe, just the way information is sent over the internet. It's disrupting a $700 billion plus remittance market. So the area that we're disrupting here is payments. And Bitcoin is decentralized. Anyone can participate, anyone can acquire it and use it to send payments anywhere around the world. Stablecoins are also fundamental to decentralized finance, and specifically around payments. Stablecoins are designed so that the price is pegged to some underlying asset, typically fiat currency like US dollars or any other fiat currency. And we have different kinds of stablecoins. And if anyone has participated in in crypto in general, you might have used stablecoins as you were trading in and out of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Tether or USDT and USDC are two more centralized stablecoins that are pegged to the US dollar. Because they're centralized, they're custodial by definition, and they're backed one-to-one with USD in reserves that the companies that run those stablecoins actually keep, and those reserves are typically audited as well. When we look at decentralized stablecoins, they are, soft pegged to the US dollar. There's actually, an algorithm that controls the peg with the US dollar, and they're non-custodial by definition. So just wanted to provide one specific area within DeFi that is really, really important to DeFi. And if we look at the market capitalization today of stablecoins, we're looking at a pretty big number. It's close to $120 billion worth of stablecoins that are currently in circulating supply. And if we look at the trade volume of stablecoins, and these numbers are from yesterday, over $73 billion of trade volume occurred with stablecoins. And I have a little bit of a breakdown, in terms of other stablecoins that people are using today in the broader kind of crypto economy. So another key piece of the infrastructure for decentralized finance, some people refer to automated market makers also as decentralized exchanges. And if you think about exchanges, if you think about a traditional exchange, like the New York Stock Exchange, for example, you're trading stock, it's happening on a centralized platform. Today we have decentralized exchanges, which allow people to trade cryptocurrencies and tokens peer-to-peer using order books. So that's kind of in contrast to centralized, equities trading. If we look at automated market makers, they're kind of like decentralized exchanges, except you can trade tokens trustlessly, of course, and there's you're trading with liquidity pools instead of directly with other people. So automated market makers use a mathematical formula to price assets, which come from liquidity providers, LPs. Anyone can provide liquidity to these automated market makers and any of these pools, and anyone can effectively, become a market maker. And in return, they're going to get fees for providing that liquidity. One of the biggest automated market makers in the world today, if not the biggest, is Uniswap. Uniswap, if we look at over the course of 12 months, they're on track to exceed $500 billion in trade volume. So a pretty significant feat for an automated market maker that's only been around for just a couple of years. Okay, money market protocols are also a key, a part of the DeFi infrastructure where folks can lend to their assets. They can also borrow assets. Aave is one of the biggest, lending and borrowing platforms in the DeFi space. It's open source. It's non-custodial liquidity protocol, and basically folks can earn interest on their deposits, and also they can borrow assets for a rate as well. So Aave currently has about 18 billion in total value that's been locked into its smart contracts, meaning people that are lending and borrowing through its smart contracts. And the way that users interact with these protocols is through a wallet. So if anyone has ever heard of like MetaMask, for example, it's a web-based wallet. You can use that to interact with any of these DeFi applications that I'm talking about here today. So if you look at the image, we can see that, these are just some of the assets that are available on Aave. We have stablecoins like USDC and USDT. There's Ethereum, and there's a whole array of other assets that you can lend and borrow on Aave's platform. Automated asset managers. So these are basically platforms that algorithmically allocate and trade deposits that you have on the platform, and deposits, of course, in smart contracts to maximize yield. Earn is a product within Yearn Finance. It basically allows anyone to lock their crypto into vaults, and then the Earn protocol actually allocates that crypto to different lending and borrowing applications across the crypto space to maximize your yield or your annual percentage yield. So all of this is done in an automated way, and it's kind of relatively worry-free. There are still some risks in DeFi that I'll talk about a little bit later, but it's nice to see that we have infrastructure within the decentralized finance space, again, that mirrors and kind of exceeds the capabilities of traditional finance here. We also have derivatives. So I'm going to talk specifically about synthetic exposure. So synthetic financial instruments are those whose value is based on a function of an underlying asset or group of assets. Synthetic assets capture the price movements of popular cryptocurrencies, fiat currencies like the US dollar, stocks, commodities, and a lot more. So synthetics is an example of a DeFi protocol that is focused on creating synthetic assets and issuing those assets, specifically built on Ethereum. And it's a way to get exposure to an asset without necessarily owning it. So synthetics also allows for the creation of indexes like the DeFi Pulse Index or DPI, which tracks the price of a basket of multiple DeFi assets. So if we think about crypto, I have an example here just on the right side. Link, the token for Chainlink, is an example of a synthetic asset that's been created on synthetics. You can also get exposure to equities, like, for example, Tesla stock. So STSLA is an example of a synthetic, a derivative for the Tesla stock, which you can get access to on synthetics. And then commodities as well, like gold and silver and other precious metals are also available that can be accessed via synthetics. So again, the purpose is not to necessarily own the underlying asset, but to get exposure to it. And that exposure can be used in complex smart contracts or a number of smart contracts that are interlinked that can execute based on certain conditions that may be drawing the price information from these synthetic assets, for example. Insurance is a space that has evolved quite a bit in DeFi as well. It's largely been focused on getting coverage against smart contract failure. So you might have heard about many situations where there's a lot of DeFi protocols out there that have been hacked, or there was a bug in the smart contract and it led to a ton of people losing a lot of money. That is really the main risk, I would say, in DeFi, is really smart contract or technical risk and exchange hacks. Nexus Mutual is a decentralized platform, and it's basically run by the members. So it's not really an insurance company. Again, it's a decentralized platform that will provide you with protection against smart contract risks and exchange hacks, and the payouts would be in ETH or in DAI, again, the stablecoin, and they're adding additional functionality as we speak. So this is an example of decentralized insurance on the Ethereum blockchain. So quickly wanted to discuss kind of two areas where people are making money in DeFi today. Of course, you can obtain tokens, and governance tokens, which are tokens that allow you to vote on the evolution of these DeFi platforms and protocols. So those tokens themselves have increased in value significantly over the last year. But another way that people are actually participating in DeFi is through something called liquidity pools and yield farming. So liquidity pools, in essence, are pools basically where the tokens are held in a smart contract. You can contribute your tokens to the smart contract, and they're used to facilitate trading by providing liquidity to decentralized exchanges, automated market makers, lending and borrowing protocols like the ones we talked about earlier, like Aave, or Compound Finance is another. So by providing your liquidity to these platforms, you're in effect benefiting from the fees that are being generated on that platform, and those fees are split proportionally based on the amount of liquidity that you're providing. Yield farming is another, has kind of come to the fore in a storm over the last year as well. It's basically the practice of staking or lending crypto assets in order to generate high returns or rewards in the form of additional cryptocurrency. So on a lot of platforms, you can yield farm by staking, the tokens you would get, let's say, from participating in liquidity pools in those yield farming platforms, and that would generate additional yield as well. So the yield that's being generated has been crazy in the past. In some cases, triple digits on average, maybe anywhere between like a few percentage points all the way up to 20–30%, depending on the type of asset we're looking at. So it's quite lucrative. So I talked about this earlier, but when we think about the total value locked in DeFi protocols, this is the primary measure for how we measure the success of the space and the adoption of DeFi services and products. So this is the total value locked inside the smart contracts of these DeFi protocols. And it's a combination of both ETH plus tokens, other cryptocurrency or crypto assets, that are locked into these platforms. And you can see, like, over the last year, we've had like very, very high growth. DeFi has grown, by 1,000% over the last year. And it's currently at about 80 billion, just north of 80 billion, I believe, in total value locked. Okay, DeFi ecosystems. So most of the products that I talked about before, or protocols rather, that I talked about before, from lending to insurance to synthetics to automated market makers and automated asset managers, a lot of this activity is happening on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And this is just, I want to spend 1 minute on this, but this is kind of just a high level ecosystem map of many, not all, but many of the DeFi protocols and products that you can use that are built on top of Ethereum. So there's, protocols in data analytics. We have derivative platforms, like, again, I talked about synthetics. There's trading. We talked about Uniswap. There's many, many others. And again, this is all decentralized trading. Lending, stablecoins, custody. So I talked about MetaMask and many, many other kind of applications or decentralized applications that are being built on top of Ethereum. So I would say Ethereum controls the lion's share of the DeFi space in general. About 70% of applications today are built in DeFi are built on top of the Ethereum blockchain. Solana is has another DeFi ecosystem that has been growing very, very quickly. Really, most of this growth has happened over the last 6 months. And they have, again, decentralized exchanges, other tools, stablecoins, lending and borrowing, derivatives, a lot of the same things you would see on Ethereum, but built specifically on top of Solana's blockchain. And there are many other DeFi ecosystems, with other blockchains, Polkadot, Cosmos, Conflux Network. There's a whole basket of other blockchain ecosystems. One of the challenges that we're starting to see, some areas of new developments in is around interoperability between blockchains. So, for example, if you were using a DeFi application on Solana and I was using that application on Ethereum, very difficult for us to to kind of interact, unless you either came onto Ethereum or I came onto Solana. But there are bridges being built between the different blockchains to allow for that interoperability, and that this is something that many development teams are working on, to kind of tackle. Just quickly, DeFi on Bitcoin. People originally didn't think this was possible because Bitcoin is not meant to be a programmable blockchain on which you can build, decentralized applications. But there's a new technology called discrete log contracts, or DLCs, which is actually making this possible. So DLCs can facilitate conditional payments on Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin blockchain, and other compatible blockchains. So, for example, by creating a discrete log contract, two parties can form a monetary contract, redistributing their funds to each other based on preset conditions, and they don't have to reveal any of those details or conditions to the blockchain. So one of the only companies in the world that is today working on DeFi specifically on the Bitcoin blockchain is a company called Atomic Finance. This is also a company that I advise, and they're up to some very interesting things, and just released a new product focused on covered calls as well. So you can feel free to follow them or learn more about them if you like. Okay, we're almost at the end. So I know I want to keep some time for questions. So just very quickly, I want to talk about some new key trends and developments in the space. So one of the areas I wanted to talk about was the revenue that's being generated across decentralized finance applications. So the different colors here, Uniswap is kind of represented in that dark navy blue, purple, Aave in the red, SushiSwap, which is another decentralized exchange, in green, Compound in purple, which is a lending borrowing protocol, and the list goes on. Across the array of decentralized applications that we have today, on average, they're generating about $200 million in revenue based on the fees, which are very small, every month. So that's a huge, huge number. And of course, those fees are being redistributed to treasuries, and to token holders and to liquidity providers in large part. So that's, again, it's a very community-based model within DeFi. Profits are shared across the board. So we've seen, obviously when you look back to May of last year, DeFi was not even a blip on the screen, and today 200 million is significant. If we look at the cumulative DeFi revenue since July of 2020, we can see that it's now grown to over 2 billion. We're probably nearing 2.5 billion in total DeFi revenue, which is substantial. Still a drop in the bucket when we compare it to traditional finance, but the potential is just massive. Okay, I think one of my last slides. So I wanted to quickly talk about key developments in the DeFi space. One area where there's been a lot of development is in something called Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, or DAOs. These are kind of entities that are, where the rules are basically defined and enforced in the form of a smart contract. And token holders can vote on certain matters affecting a protocol via the DAO, via the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, who would then execute the decision on the blockchain based on the votes. So DAOs are going to be a very, very important governance model for DeFi and beyond, across the open blockchain space in general. Very interestingly, like the state of Wyoming, as of July 1st, they're recognizing DAOs as an official entity, that where DAO decisions and matters would be admissible in a court of law. So that's really interesting to see, the government kind of being very, very innovative there. And Caitlin Long has been a long time advocate of crypto and the DeFi space, and is working with regulators tirelessly to make this happen, and other innovations within the regulatory space for crypto. Real world assets as collateral is another area. So we talked about how, for example, in lending and borrowing protocols like Aave or Compound Finance, if you wanted to borrow, for example, you would have to collateralize other crypto, right? So you would need some additional crypto that you're locking into a contract, and then the crypto that you're looking for, maybe it's stablecoins, will be unlocked to you and made available to you at a specific interest rate. What if you could collateralize real world assets, like, could be NFTs, it could be a physical piece of real estate that's fractionalized. It could be future revenues of a company that could be collateralized. So there's a lot of interesting areas where, and the organization that's really leading that innovation is MakerDAO, that has created the DAI cryptocurrency that we talked about, the stablecoin. So they're kind of leading the way, and that's a really, really exciting space, because it's really connecting the traditional finance world to DeFi. The NFT fractionalization and derivatives. So we're also seeing, I don't know if you just heard, but Visa just announced yesterday or the day before that they purchased a non-fungible token, an NFT, called a CryptoPunk for $150,000. We're starting to see exchanges and platforms like NFTX is one of them, that is basically allowing for NFTs to be fractionalized, especially for pricier NFTs, and allow for more kind of distributed ownership. So that's a really interesting area as well, and that very much fits within the realm of decentralized finance. Okay, last slide, resources to guide your journey. If you'd like to dive in a little bit deeper, highly recommend DeFi Beyond the Hype, the Emerging World of Decentralized Finance. It's a paper that was written by Wharton, the Blockchain Digital Asset Project. So that group specifically, and highly recommend that read. It's a great overview of the DeFi space. This book was just announced yesterday. I actually just purchased it, waiting for it to arrive in the next couple of weeks. Highly recommend that. And there's a lot of other venues like the Defiant. They have a great newsletter. Delphi Digital has a lot of great research. Bankless, who has a podcast and a newsletter as well, where you can learn and dive deeper into the DeFi space. And I'm always happy, of course, to guide your journey if anyone has any questions or ideas. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Rami and Christine. I know I went quite long, and we only have a few minutes left for questions, but happy to field any questions that the audience has.
No worries. And thank you, Alim. That was very enlightening. We don't have a lot of questions in the chat, but I'll give those who have asked a second to ask their questions. So Noah, you asked a question. And if you want to, if you're still in the chat, or excuse me, you're still here, go ahead and unmute your mic, and then you can go ahead and ask your question in relation to which slide he was referring to. Noah's question was, oh, go ahead, Noah, thanks.
Okay, I don't remember exactly which slide it was, but he was talking about synthetic exposures, and it kind of reminded me of a mutual fund, but I wasn't sure. So I was just kind of asking if they were similar or not.
Yeah, they are similar in a way. So there's kind of two areas of synthetic exposure. One is directly to a single underlying asset. So for example, if I wanted exposure to Tesla's stock price, I could get that via synthetics.
Yeah,
they have a derivative for that. But when we compare it to kind of like a mutual fund, we think about a basket of underlying assets, right? And underlying equities, or a combination of equities, commodities, and other financial assets. So you can also have synthetic exposure to an index fund, in which case I talked about DPI, which is the DeFi Pulse Index. That has several DeFi tokens within its basket that forms that derivative.
So the synthetic exposures are more in relation to one single thing, whereas like a mutual fund and the DPI is like a basket, right? Hello?
Alim, are you there?
Hey,
we can
sorry,
hear you.
no, I think it's breaking up. I'm not sure if it's just for me or if it's for anyone else.
Okay. What I was saying was, I was asking if the synthetic exposure was like in relation to one individual thing, where a mutual fund was like a basket, and DPI and that stuff, right?
Oh,
Alim,
are you there? I think we.
I'm back. I think it looks like I got kicked out or something. But sorry, no, I missed the rest of that. If you don't mind repeating it.
I was just trying to grasp the concept. I was saying like, so as you were explaining, a mutual fund and DPI is like a basket, whereas the synthetic exposure is like just in relation to one individual thing, like say Tesla stock, and it's tethered to that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Hey, can I ask a question?
For sure. Yeah, I was gonna say if anyone else wants to ask it, but Alim, you don't mind hanging back for a few minutes.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can ask their question one at a time. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Alim. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. I wanted to ask you about like, what do you think about? I mean, governments. Do you think many people say that governments maybe won't be happy about DeFi? I have a question, because people say like, yeah, but governments can't do anything. They can't stop it. But like, they can tell me that it's illegal for my company to state on the website that that people can use a Bitcoin or another crypto to pay for the service. Like, what do you suggest?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and ultimately it comes down to governance of that protocol. So if you have a DeFi application, who controls it right now? Is it like, for example, if you had it, is it your team that's developing on it, or have you transferred? Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm freezing up again here. Have you transferred governance to a decentralized autonomous organization? If you have transferred governance to a decentralized autonomous organization, effectively that is run by the community. It's no longer run by you. Therefore, I would say the government probably.
Did we lose him again?
Yeah,
I think so. Oh no. All right, let's give him a minute to pop back in. There he is.
Sorry about this. I'm glad we're having technical difficulties at the end of the presentation for citizens to read. So, but what I wanted to say is that it comes back down to governance. So again, if you and your team are governing the protocol and making the decisions, yes, the government could kind of come after you, and for any number of reasons. If you're doing any illegal activity, for example, KYC and AML, anti-money laundering protocols, are important within financial services to protect investors and participants in the financial system. Most decentralized finance protocols don't have those measures in place. and they're very much, there's no barriers to participate. But the ultimate expression of being decentralized is moving to a DAO structure, in which case no single entity can kind of dictate it. It's really the community.
Maybe I just maybe in more detail, I meant it like basically if the prime minister or anybody from this kind of government said, your business or your website, like if I offer services, for example, and people find me on the internet and they tell me I cannot put on the website that they can pay in crypto. You know what I mean? This could be like, how could like DeFi cope up with this? Or is it, or do you think it's impossible? Like the government wouldn't do this? Like in China, I know there were some problems, I think, with the crypto and with DeFi. Yeah, it's the.
Yeah, that's something. Sorry, I think we lost Alim again. There he is. Why don't we do this? Alim, why don't you, and if anyone has any questions, why don't we just take this conversation offline? Seems like we're having some connectivity issues, and I don't want to, keep everyone waiting in case they have somewhere else to go. So Alim's available on social media. He has a Twitter account, has a LinkedIn account. And Dennis, why don't you do this? Why don't you send me your email address, and then I'll connect you with Alim if you have any more questions to ask him to follow up.
And I'll just put my email address as well.
Yeah, it'd be nice to connect. I'm actually a blockchain dev at a DeFi startup, and
nice.
I've been using DeFi since about late 2017, early 2018. So I'm using more DeFi than traditional finance at this point.
So you're an OG in the space. You're bringing others into the fold, so that's great.
I know. At least I was using Eastland, so that was a precursor to Aave when before Aave even was a thing.
Totally, that's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to connect if anyone wants to, and we can kind of continue the conversation.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay, I'll shoot you an email. Okay.
Alim's email for everyone is in the chat box, so make sure you get that here pretty quickly. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. We'll go ahead and end our session here in another minute or so. But again, thank you again, Alim. It was a very enlightening talk, very informational. Our Blockchain Fit 901 series, you can find the recording for today's talk on our website. It's in the chat function right below Alim's email address. And then our next session is set for September 17th. We're going to have one of the founders of Dex Freight speaking in that session. So for more information, everything you need to know about this engagement series, speaker series, visit the website memphis.edu/fedex/engagement fit_901 blockchain 901. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Alim.
Thank you, Rami.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Christine.